Mason didn't look at me when he left. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the oversized suitcase, not the new sport coat he'd bought without mentioning it, not even the pale circle on his left ring finger where his wedding band usually sat. It was that he didn't look at me. Not once. "The leadership summit runs through Sunday," he said, adjusting the strap of his carry-on. "Don't bother calling. I'll be in back-to-back sessions." I didn't say anything. I stood in the hallway of our Burlington home and watched him step out the door, one hand reaching back to grab the handle of the large rolling suitcase I'd never seen before last week. In the pocket of my cardigan, I had a folded piece of paper. It was his flight itinerary, printed from our shared Outlook calendar that he forgot I still had access to. 2 passengers confirmed, Mason Devereaux and Tanya Holt. Turks and Caicos, business class. Charged to the RBC visa that technically had my name at the top. Down the street, a gray RAV4 idled near the corner. As Mason reached the end of our driveway, the passenger window rolled down. I didn't see her face clearly from where I stood, just a hand, fingers with long nails, giving a little wave. I pressed the paper tighter in my fist and didn't move until the car was out of sight. "Mom." Phoebe's voice came from the top of the stairs. She was already awake, already dressed, arms crossed. When she came down to the kitchen, she looked at me the way she'd been looking at me for 3 weeks, like she was bracing for something or maybe already past it. "Did he leave?" "Said it was a leadership summit," I told her. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. In Turks and Caicos, what a tough industry. She pulled her old MacBook from her university bag and set it on the kitchen island. I recognized it. It was Mason's old laptop from 2 years ago, the one he'd handed down to her when he upgraded. He'd never thought to sign out of his accounts. "I've known for almost a month," she said quietly. "I didn't know how to tell you, and then I realized you already knew." She turned the screen toward me. His iMessage thread with Tanya Holt. I'd seen it the week before, on Phoebe's phone, on a night she'd left it open on the counter. But seeing it again on the bigger screen made it sharper, more real. "Grace Bay Resort, got us the Ocean View suite. Can't wait to be done with that house. Done with all of it." And Tanya's reply, "Once everything's sorted with your wife, we can finally look at places in Yorkville. I already have a short list, LOL. I closed the laptop gently, my hands were steady. "He thinks I don't know anything," I said. Phoebe looked at me for a long moment. "What are we going to do?" I took off my cardigan and laid it over the back of a stool. "We're going to start packing." What Mason didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn in 14 years of marriage, was that the ground beneath his feet had shifted long before Tanya Holt came along. 6 years ago, Mason's spending caught up with him. He'd always had a taste for things he couldn't quite afford. The BMW lease, he insisted, was a business necessity. The golf membership at a club in Halton Hills, the weekend trips to Montreal, he logged under client entertainment, even when no clients were involved. The visa statement I managed every month told the real story. By the time our daughter was finishing high school, we were carrying over $90,000 in consumer debt, and a notice from our lender arrived informing us we were 3 payments behind on the mortgage. Mason went pale. He spent 2 days pacing the kitchen, muttering about cash flow problems and timing. What he meant was, he had spent us to the edge of losing everything. My father had died the winter before, a quiet man, a retired electrician from Hamilton, who'd worked his whole life in the trades and lent me $165,000 from his life insurance policy. It sat in a TFSA in my name at a TD branch on Brant Street. Mason had never once asked about it. I used it to pay off the mortgage in full. I didn't tell Mason exactly how. I told him I'd sorted it out, and that we needed to go to the notary to sign some paperwork. He was so relieved, so genuinely, pathetically relieved, that he barely glanced at the documents. A transfer of title, prepared by a notary in downtown Burlington. The property transferred entirely into my name alone. Stella Devereaux, sole registered owner. The notary explained it twice. Mason nodded along, clicked the pen, and signed on the line. He came home that afternoon, opened a beer, and watched a hockey game like nothing had happened. He still called it my house at dinner parties. He still knocked on walls and said things like good bones. He still made decisions about what to plant in the backyard, as though the deed to the soil had his name on it. It didn't. By 11 that Thursday morning, Phoebe and I had pulled 12 cardboard boxes from the storage room in the basement. Boxes I'd ordered from U-Haul 2 weeks earlier, when I stopped pretending I hadn't seen what I'd seen. We went through Mason's walk-in closet first. The Italian suits he'd bought on a solo business trip. The dress shirts still in dry cleaning bags. The Longines watch he'd shown me on his wrist and said was a gift from a client. I didn't fold any of it. There was no point. Phoebe taped the boxes shut without comment. She was efficient in the way she gets when she's holding something back. She didn't handle any of it with care either. She just put things in boxes the way you throw away something you're done with. "Is that everything?" she asked, surveying the empty side of the closet. "Almost." I went to Mason's desk in the second bedroom, the one he called his home office, though mostly it held golf trophies and unopened mail. In the bottom drawer, beneath a file folder labeled Tax Returns, I found it. A form I didn't recognize at first. Then I read the header, Petition for Divorce, Province of Ontario, his name, my name, and in the margin, in pink ink, a handwritten note in someone else's handwriting. Finally, T. I stood there for a moment, then I put it in my bag. I'd been quietly building my file for 3 months. The land title from the Ontario Land Registry. Printed and certified. The mortgage payoff confirmation from TD. The RBC visa statements, going back 8 months, which showed a pattern of charges at restaurants and hotels in downtown Toronto on evenings when Mason said he was working late. The screenshots Phoebe had saved from his iCloud. The Grace Bay reservation. The texts about Yorkville. A selfie from a restaurant in King West that he'd sent to Tanya with the caption, "My actual life starts in 3 weeks." And the Purolator waybills. 12 of them, addressed to Tanya Holt, Liberty Village, Toronto, marked COD. I'd spoken to my family lawyer the week before, Carolyn Webb, a sharp woman in her early 50s with an office on New Street, who'd been recommended by a friend from my old marketing job. Carolyn had told me to get my documents in order and say nothing to Mason until we were ready to move. We were ready. I called Purolator at noon. They confirmed a same-day pickup window between 1 and 3. I told them the boxes would be ready. While Phoebe made sandwiches in the kitchen, because somehow life keeps requiring lunch even when everything is falling apart. I suspended Mason's card through the RBC app. It took about 40 seconds. I went into authorized users, found his name, and toggled the card to inactive. That card had paid for Tanya's dinners at Canoe, her spa weekend at the Pillar and Post in Niagara-on-the-Lake. The Aritzia coat Mason told me was for a client's wife, the Grace Bay resort deposit. My father's money. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a minute, not crying, just breathing. "Sandwiches are on the counter," Phoebe said from behind me. "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than she probably understood. The Purolator driver arrived at 1:20 with a van. He didn't ask questions. He loaded the 12 boxes and handed me a receipt. I confirmed the delivery address, Tanya's condo in Liberty Village. I'd added a note under delivery instructions. COD. Recipient pays on delivery. Do not leave without payment. The COD fees for 12 boxes came to $740. Tanya Holt was still in Toronto. Her flight to Turks and Caicos was the following morning, Friday, at 6:45 a.m. out of Pearson. I knew this because the booking confirmation had been forwarded automatically to our shared email inbox. Mason's iCloud, still synced, still careless. The boxes would arrive at her door that evening. Before she ever boarded the plane. I pictured the look on her face. Then I stopped picturing it and ate half my sandwich. Phoebe and I left the house at 3. 2 overnight bags, a laundry basket of essentials, her laptop, a box of things from the kitchen that were mine. I locked the front door behind me and put the key deep in my purse. I had rented a furnished suite in Etobicoke, booked 3 weeks ago under my name, paid from my personal CIBZ account. A quiet building off the Queensway, 11th floor, parking included. On the drive there, my phone buzzed. An RBC notification. Purchase attempted. Merchant, the Meridian Club Providenciales Turks and Caicos. Amount CAD $387. Card inactive. Transaction declined. I showed Phoebe at a red light. She read it once and looked out the window. "Good," she said. By 7 that evening, Mason had called 11 times. I didn't answer any of them. I watched each call ring out and go to voicemail. His texts started at 7:15. "Card isn't working. Call me back." Then, "Stella, I'm serious, something is wrong with the account. I'm standing at the front desk of this hotel." Then, "This is embarrassing. Fix it." I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter of the Etobicoke suite and poured myself a glass of Pinot Gris. I thought about Mason at the front desk of the Grace Bay Resort. The way he always presented cards and checks and receipts like he was doing you a favor. The card reader's quiet little beep of rejection. The front desk clerk's carefully neutral expression, his face changing. I didn't feel sorry for him. I hadn't expected to, but it was still a distinct thing to notice, the complete absence of it. Around 9:30, a second wave of notifications hit. Purchase attempted. Merchant, Providenciales Fine Jewelry & Co. Amount CAD $15,800. Card inactive. Transaction declined. I stared at the screen for a long time. $15,800. At a jewelry boutique. Phoebe looked over my shoulder. She didn't say anything right away. I thought about our wedding. A small ceremony at a conservation area outside Hamilton. 20 people, folding chairs, the justice of the peace. Mason had said an engagement ring was a diamond industry scam. I'm not buying into it. He'd given me a plain silver band that belonged to his grandmother. I'd thought it was romantic. I'd thought it meant he valued meaning over performance. 14 years later, he was standing in a jewelry boutique in the Caribbean, trying to spend my father's inheritance on a ring for a 29-year-old woman who had written finally in pink pen on my divorce papers. I set the phone down. Mom. Phoebe sat beside me. She put her hand over mine on the table. I'm fine, I said, and then I'm angry. That's okay. 15 years, Phoebe. I know. We sat there quietly for a moment. The city hummed 11 floors below us. Let's go over the documents, I finally said, for the lawyer. We spread everything across the dining table. I'd brought the accordion folder I'd been building since January. The Ontario Land Registry title, Stella Devereaux, sole registered owner. The TD mortgage payoff confirmation from 6 years ago. 8 months of RBC visa statements with relevant charges highlighted. The iCloud screenshots Fedviad saved. The hotel reservation. The texts, the King West selfie. The divorce petition I'd found in Mason's desk, complete with finally. T in the margin. The bank alerts I'd screenshotted as they came in. The declined restaurant charges. The declined jewelry attempt. And, at the bottom of the pile, something I'd found when sorting through Mason's filing cabinet 2 weeks earlier, a loan agreement from Fairstone Financial. $45,000, signed in October, around the time Mason started buying new clothes and coming home later. The interest rate was predatory. He borrowed $45,000, Phoebe said flatly. To fund a life he couldn't afford on his salary, I said. She shook her head. He thought he could just sell the house after, pay it all off. He doesn't know the house isn't his. We looked at each other across the table, and then we both looked down at the stack of documents that proved exactly that. Phoebe's phone buzzed at 10:15. A text from an unknown number. She showed me the screen. Grandma. I nodded. Answer it, put it on speaker. Phoebe pressed the green button. Phoebe, why is your mother not answering her phone? Bernice's voice came through, tight and clipped the way it always was when she felt owed something. She's busy, Phoebe said. What's wrong? What's wrong? There's apparently some mix-up with the account. Mason called me. He's stranded down there with a card that won't work. Someone needs to sort this out. That's between him and Mom, Phoebe said. Bernice made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Your father works incredibly hard. Tanya's been wonderful for him. She actually appreciates what he does, which is more than I can say for some people in this family. That place in the annex they're considering. Mason says it's gorgeous, very practical for where he is in his career. Phoebe glanced at me. I nodded slowly. Grandma, Phoebe said. You know he's in Turks and Caicos with Tanya right now. It's not a work summit. A beat of silence. Then, he works very hard, Bernice repeated, but the certainty in her voice had softened. I reached over and took the phone. Bernice, it's Stella. Silence. I heard everything you said. I'll be coming to see you in a few days. There are some things you should know about your son's finances. A long pause. I don't see what that has to do with anything. You will, I said, and ended the call. The next morning, I was at Carolyn Webb's office on New Street at 9 o'clock. She went through my documents slowly and carefully, not rushing, not skimming. When she got to the Fairstone loan agreement, she set it down and looked up at me. He took this out in October, and you had no idea. I found it in his filing cabinet 2 weeks ago. And the visa, he was an authorized user on your account. He used it for 8 months to fund their relationship. Restaurants, hotels, a weekend at the Pillar and Post. Carolyn tapped the jewelry alert I'd screenshotted. $15,800. Declined, I said. She almost smiled. Stella, with what you've brought me today, we're going to walk out of this entirely on your terms. The house is in your name. It's not a marital asset subject to division. It was purchased using your inheritance, transferred into your name before any of this began. His claim to it is 0. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. We'll file immediately. I'll also draft a cease and desist to Tanya Holt. She's documented in these messages, discussing the sale of your property and benefiting from funds charged to your credit account. We can pull her into discovery if she doesn't cooperate. Whatever it takes, I said. And the Fairstone debt, that's entirely his. You're not on the loan. I know. Carolyn closed the folder. He's going to come home to an empty house and a lawyer's letter. Do you want to be there when that happens? No, I said. I'm going to leave him a letter. I drove to the house alone that evening. The neighborhood was quiet in the way Burlington gets on weekday evenings, sprinklers going. Someone walking a dog down the sidewalk, the stillness of suburbs at dusk. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled different already. Lighter. The echo of my footsteps in the hallway was new. Without Mason's coats on the hooks, his shoes by the door, his jacket draped over the banister where I'd asked him 100 times not to leave it. The space felt genuinely open. I set the envelope on the kitchen island. Inside was a copy of Carolyn's letter and a short note I'd written myself. Mason, your belongings have been delivered to Tanya Holt's address in Liberty Village via Purolator. See odd. The property deed for this house has been in my name for 6 years. You signed the transfer yourself. The mortgage was paid using my father's insurance payout. The RBC visa you've been using is mine. I froze it. I know about the Fairstone loan. All future communication goes through my lawyer, Carolyn Webb. No anger, no accusations, just the shape of what was real. I locked the front door behind me and didn't look back. Mason landed at Pearson on Monday afternoon. Phoebe still had his travel app connected, and we watched his flight status together from the Etobicoke suite. He called me 7 times between clearing customs and reaching the house. I let everyone ring out. His texts arrived in waves. The house is completely empty. What is going on? Then, Stella, where is my stuff? This isn't funny. Then, about 20 minutes later, a different tone entirely. I read your letter. I didn't know about the deed. Please call me. We need to talk about this. I didn't reply. Carolyn called that evening. He contacted the office. I told him all communication goes through me. A pause. He sounded completely lost. Good, I said. Around 9 p.m., Phoebe's iCloud, still connected to Mason's account, lit up with a string of messages from Tanya. Mason, I swear if you come here, I'm calling the concierge. Your lawyer sent a demand letter to my work email. Do you know how embarrassing this is? I paid $740 for those boxes. $740, and now I can't even get to my closet. Then, you told me the house would be easy. You said she had no idea about anything. Clearly that was a lie. Then, after a long gap, I'm not getting deposed. My lawyer says if I settle now I can avoid court. I'm going to settle. Phoebe turned the screen toward me. She paid the $740, she said. She did. And she's already talking to a lawyer. Smart girl, I said, and meant it as neither a compliment nor an insult, just a fact. I visited Bernice on Wednesday afternoon. She opened the door to her Port Credit condo looking like she'd slept badly. Mason was there on the couch in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. He didn't look at me when I walked in. The symmetry of that wasn't lost on me. You have a lot of nerve, Bernice started. Bernice. I set my folder on the coffee table and opened it. I'd prefer to do this calmly. I placed the Ontario land title on the table, then the TD mortgage payoff confirmation, then the Fairstone loan agreement. Bernice leaned in, squinting. Then she looked up at Mason. What is this? It says Stella owns the house. Mason said nothing. 6 years ago, I said, Mason was 4 months behind on the mortgage. I used the insurance payout from my father's estate to pay off the remaining balance in full. The title was transferred into my name at the time. Mason signed the paperwork. I didn't read it properly, he said. His voice was flat. No, I agreed. You didn't. Bernice looked at the Fairstone document. And this one? A personal loan Mason took out last October. $45,000. At an interest rate that will cost him a great deal more than that over time. I paused. I'm assuming you didn't know. Bernice set the paper down. The RBC visa he's been using for 8 months, dinners, hotels, a spa weekend in wine country, was in my name. He was an authorized user. The charges came from an account tied to my father's estate. I let that land. He tried to charge $15,000 at a jewelry boutique in Providenciales last Thursday. Bernice turned to look at her son. It was declined, I said, because I had already frozen the account. The room was very quiet. The rent assistance you've been receiving each month, I continued, turning to Bernice directly, has been coming from my paycheck at the bookshop. Not from Mason. He told me 2 years ago he couldn't contribute, so I covered it. Every month. $700. Bercie's face moved through several things at once. Mason, she said finally, her voice low, is this true? He stared at the floor and said nothing. His silence was its own confession. I closed the folder and picked it up. The divorce will be finalized through our lawyers. The house stays with me. Mason's restitution for the misuse of marital funds is being negotiated by counsel. I looked at him once, directly. I stayed quiet for 14 years to protect Phoebe and to protect what my father left me. Not because I had no options, because I was building them. He didn't look up. I nodded to Bernice, not warmly but civilly, and left. The agreement was signed 6 weeks later. Mason conceded on every point. The house remained solely mine. He agreed to $48,000 in restitution for the misuse of trust-linked funds. He assumed full liability for the Fairstone debt. Tanya settled separately with Carolyn for $22,000. She wanted it done quietly and quickly, which Carolyn was happy to accommodate strictly on our terms. Phoebe was with me when Carolyn called to confirm. It's done, I told her. She exhaled. Then she reached across and hugged me, and I held on for a long moment. We went for dinner at a little Italian place on Lakeshore that evening, just the two of us, a corner table, a bottle of Barolo we couldn't quite justify and ordered anyway. We talked about the renovation. Phoebe wanted the wall between the old home office and the spare bedroom knocked out to make a proper study. I wanted new kitchen counters and a window that actually opened above the sink. We talked about Mason the way you talk about a person who has become, over a specific number of weeks, simply a past chapter. Not with hatred, not with grief, just with the calm, slightly distant acknowledgement that the chapter had closed. Do you think he'll be okay? Phoebe asked at one point. I thought about it honestly. I don't know. That's not really mine to worry about anymore. She nodded. Fair enough. The contractors started in late October. We moved back in on a Friday afternoon in November, when the maple on the front lawn had gone full orange and the air had that particular sharpness that comes just before the first real cold. I unlocked the front door and stood in the hallway for a moment. New floors, bright walls, the kitchen exactly as I'd wanted it, white oak cabinets, a wide counter, a window above the sink that opened all the way. The old home office was gone, replaced by a proper room with good light and built-in shelving. On the hall table, I placed a framed photograph of my father, taken in the backyard of the house he grew up in, outside Hamilton. He's squinting slightly into the sun, smiling. He looks like a man who worked hard and knew exactly what he was leaving behind. Dad, I said quietly, I kept it. Phoebe came in behind me, carrying a box of her things from the car. She stopped in the doorway and looked around. It feels completely different, she said. It is completely different, I said. She set the box down. Good different. Very good different. I walked into the kitchen, filled the kettle, and started unpacking cups. 14 years of someone else's noise, the heavy footsteps, the sighing, the small cruelties delivered in the language of disappointment. All of it had lifted. What remained was quiet and warm and entirely mine. I made tea. Phoebe put on music. Outside, the November light came through the new kitchen window in a clean, unbroken line across the counter. I had fought quietly, methodically, and all the way to the end. And standing there in the kitchen, my father's money had bought, in the house that bore my name and no one else's, I thought, this is what it feels like to finally stop waiting for permission to live your own life. The kettle clicked off. I poured. We were home.